Yeah, today's session is called Performance Max Decoded, and it's named that way because um, I think it's an interesting contradiction. Performance Max is kind of intended by Google to be their most powerful and their simplest technology ever, but it's often quite mysterious. And every time that we host a webinar related to Performance Max, we get tons and tons of questions, which I think tells you something about the technology. Um, but before we go further in, I just want to stimulate your imagination here. Um, with a story from a 10-year-old movie. I can't believe it, but the movie Interstellar, it's 10 years old now. There's a scene in there that I love. And basically, there is this space station that is spinning out of control. It's damaged. There's metal shrapnel flying through the cold, dead vacuum of space. And there's this little kind of lifeboat, this very small spacecraft that has a pilot in it who looks at that spinning space station, and he jams forward on the throttle of this kind of spacecraft lifeboat. He starts sprinting through space at a spinning space station, and his crew asks him, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm docking." And they say, "That's not possible." And he says, "No, it's necessary." I love this. It's such a cool scene, and it reminds me a little bit of PMax, because PMax is this thing that you need to connect your business to. You need to make it work for your business. And a lot of people will tell you it's not possible to optimize PMax. PMax is plug and play, or it's set it and forget it. There's nothing left to optimize there. It's a fully automated campaign. And so I'm here today to tell you it's necessary. So anyone who tells you it's impossible, don't listen. It's necessary to connect your business data to Performance Max. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot today. First, here's a look at the agenda. Really quick, going to talk about us, myself, and the company Smarter E-commerce. Won't take much of your time. Then I'm going to show you a little bit under the hood of Performance Max. It's something that I love to look at. Then we're going to kind of set the mindset with 3 quotes about Performance Max. I'll share with you briefly a little bit about our approach, how we look at this, and then we're going to get into lots of cases and frameworks for how to do that thing that is possible and necessary, which is to connect your business data to Performance Max. Then we'll have a Q&A at the end. So a word about us. My name is Mike. Wow, I'm looking at that photo. My hair's a lot longer in that picture than right now. But yeah, I've got a background in retail, and I've been working in e-commerce and e-commerce advertising for 7 years now at Smarter E-commerce. I've been told that I undersell myself, so I'll try to sell myself just a little bit. I'm somehow one of the top 10 PPC influencers, or most influential experts in paid search and pay-per-click marketing. I speak with a lot of newspapers like the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, all kinds of things about what's going on in e-commerce and advertising. And yeah, I love to dig into data, particularly Performance Max data, and share that with the world. I'm also super lucky because basically, we're at a company that's been around for 16 years. And so we have this deep DNA and legacy that we draw on. I've only been there for 7 of 16 years, but I'm standing on the shoulders of giants and lots of experts. We have tons of people who you might not see behind the scenes. I don't know, I'm just lucky enough to learn from them every day. I'm not a lone wolf. I'm not a freelancer or anything like that. I work with a great team with lots of smart people and wonderful clients as well. These are just some of the brands and retailers that we work with. We work with a lot of the largest brands and retailers in Europe, and also in the US as well. So that's about us. You'll learn more about us, I think, through what I'm telling you today. First, I want to take a quick look under the hood. Actually, let me back up, because I'm not a mechanic. I grew up in the woods more or less, and when I was a boy, I loved to take like rocks and logs and things and lift them up and look at what's living down there. What the heck is going on down there? Sometimes you find like, a colony of ants or a snake, put it in a paper bag, or things that you didn't even know what they were. I always found that really interesting. And I still look at that today just with data. And PMax is a very funny rock to lift. Let's start with kind of a market view here. PMax is really well adopted at this point. You can see that there was a very steep adoption curve in the second half of 2022, which was actually a migration. It was the migration of smart shopping campaigns, which were already well adopted, into Performance Max campaigns. Things slowed down for a little bit, and then the adoption picked up again, which I think is in response to some cool features that Google has. Yeah, I think Google's listening and they're improving Performance Max. They're trying to get over some advertiser concerns, and this adoption level will vary per market. Like if you're looking at the US or the UK, you might see greater than 90% adoption, and if you're looking at like Germany, you might see around 70%. So this can vary quite a bit depending on market, depending on industry. But, one reason that it was adopted so well is that besides the fact that it's just built on the success of smart shopping before it, is that by the numbers, PMax does really well. What this does, I'm just looking at here, all these thousands of PMax campaigns that we have access to, several thousand PMax campaigns, and just looking at how many of them are on target with the ROAS target, below target, or above target. And you can see that about half of the time they're right on target, and they tend to more than a third of the time they tend to overperform the target. There's pros and cons to that. You have to remember that if you're overperforming your target, then potentially you're leaving money on the table. So over delivery is definitely an interesting topic to think about with PMax, but fundamentally it's working pretty well by the numbers in platform. I'm going to show you more about that in a second, where you might want to take a bit more of a critical stance on that. But it does take data for this to work. I think the value proposition of PMax is probably best for small businesses where they need a lot of help with this heavy automation that comes into play. And yet it thrives on data. It's just the way it is. It is a data-driven product. It's an algorithmic product. So this is the same chart as before, where you see, below target, above target, on target, but now it's broken down by number of monthly conversions. And so you can see that below target performance is pretty high when you have very few conversions. It can be upwards of 50% of campaigns are missing their target, but that really tails off rapidly as the conversion volume increases. So, with 60 or more monthly conversions, that's kind of the sweet spot where you want to be. And it's a reminder, we all used to segment like crazy back in the day. You don't want to over segment with this technology. Segmentation needs to be meaningful, purpose driven. It needs to support your business. It needs to reflect significant information about your business, which is something that we'll be talking about today. We do all kinds of, I'm not the only one digging and sniffing around with PMax. We do all kinds of testing and experimentation with PMax. Here we looked at how well PMax responds to changes in the target ROAS. And if you follow the yellow line there, that would be kind of this perfectly linear trend of these 5% increments to the ROAS change. But you see that the dark blue line deviates from that. So we see that there are saturation effects that occur. And PMax won't perfectly track changes to your target ROAS. It's, again, a reminder to be also purposeful and intentional about when and why you're making changes to your ROAS target. The same is true about budget. So it's not really a campaign type that you want to tinker with too much, but it's also not set it and forget it. And this is one last thing before we go on. This is showing you a little bit about what's going on inside of data-driven attribution inside of PMax. So what I've done here is just take all of these fractional conversions where an item received like less than 1 but greater than 0 conversions in a given month, and I just looked at the distribution of that, and I've done this analysis more than one time, and it always looks roughly the same. It's sort of like this secret wavelength or something, or frequency that's there in data-driven attribution. And we can learn a couple of things from it. We see that there are a ton of items that are getting 1%, 2%, or 3% of a conversion, which to me is a bit concerning. I call these kissed by attributions, where like PMax is just kind of kissing the conversion funnel enough to take credit. We also see that, data-driven, it's imagined as this algorithmic data-driven alternative to heuristic models like last click or time decay or et cetera, position-based. But we actually see that there are these big spikes again around clean fractions, like half of a conversion, a third of a conversion. And so it seems that actually data-driven attribution is falling back on heuristics itself quite often. So it's just something interesting to remember. And I really encourage you to think critically about the performance that PMax delivers to you. I'm not here to like diss on it, but let's just be realistic. Quick side note, actually, where are we? Let's get into mindset. I told you already that smart shopping was well adopted, and that's one reason why PMax is well adopted. Now rewind to like 2020 or so, and I was not a fan of smart shopping at all. I was very critical toward it. And, I think PMax is a better product than smart shopping was. Not everyone agrees with me about that, but I'm convinced it's a better product. So that's one reason that I'm more supportive of PMax. But the other thing is that, it didn't matter what I said, that I was concerned about smart shopping, or maybe you shouldn't use this or not. The market made up its mind with or without me, and smart shopping was well adopted. So this time around, not just me, but we as a company, we felt it's important not to leave advertisers just alone with this technology, but rather to kind of acknowledge the reality on the ground. People are going to use this, help them use it responsibly. So I hope you'll see what I mean by responsibly as we go through some of the use cases. I just want to go through 3 quotes quick to kind of lay some groundwork for how we think about Performance Max. The first comes from a Googler. Niels is the head of Google Smart Bidding here in Europe. And he wrote on Think with Google that 80% of advertisers, this was a few years ago, it's even higher now, most advertisers are using automated bidding. And he also said, when everyone's doing the same thing, it's difficult to stand out. Now, I don't think that just applies to bidding. I think it also applies to the PMax technology, campaign technology more broadly. There's a question about how you differentiate from your competitors. A lot of promotional and tactical levers that we used to have are gone now. So how do you kind of reconcile that in the new world? And actually, I believe 𝗺𝗺𝗃 is joining us live from Cannes in France. Am I saying that right? I don't speak French, but yeah, I'll also quote Fred briefly. He talks about unleveling the playing field, and that's something that I definitely agree with. So the second quote comes from Connor, the CEO at, CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer at Ridge Wallet, which is a really successful direct-to-consumer wallet brand in the US. And he doesn't like this whole haters and like this whole for or against thing with Performance Max. He says that the problem is it's not always going to align with underlying business goals. And ultimately, it's your job as a marketer to make sure that it aligns with those business goals, and rather than being for or against. If you're aligning it to your business, that's the battle right there. And again, I'll go back to my Matthew McConaughey man crush quote. No, it's necessary. It's necessary to align with your business goals. Oh man, and the last quote is from me. Shameless of me, shameless, but I did say this is about our approach and the way we think about it. So I want to remind you that AI is not strategic. And this is not a criticism of AI. It's not a criticism of ML. We use ML in our products, in our software, and we have been doing so for years. So that's not the point. The point is being realistic and understanding the limitations of this technology and its strengths and weaknesses. Let's just take, because I've written here that algorithms think on a per auction basis. So let's take a signal that the algorithm looks at, like pricing, for example. The algorithm has one job there. Algorithm is looking at your pricing relative to other prices in the auction, and it's trying to think about how this will impact the click-through rate. And because that's Google wants to kind of harvest clicks for their own business model, of course, and they also want to match the supply of advertisers with the demand of consumers, so that advertisers are growing their businesses and so that consumers are having a satisfying experience on Google. But the way you look at pricing might be entirely different from that. It's your job to look at pricing on a longer view, strategically. Like, how does discounting affect my my margins? What kind of customers do I acquire when I discount? You know, am I acquiring people who are only going to purchase on discount and who are not brand loyal? You know, how do I want to be positioned relative to my competitors? Do I want to be a follower or a leader on price? There are so many things that come into pricing, and an algorithm, it doesn't know any of that, and it can't care about any of that. It's just thinking in this very narrow context. It's brilliant in that. It's doing an incredible amount of work that humans would struggle to do, but it's thinking very narrowly. So with that, we come to a word about our approach. What we see a lot is that, well, God forbid, we do see accounts where there's just a single PMax campaign up and running. I don't care for this at all. You are just telling Google and telling PMax that all of your products are equal and that there's no difference between them. And that's certainly not the case. And even if you're segmenting on brand or category, which is the next most common scenario that we see, this is a story as old as time. You're going to have averaged performance in there. There are both at, you know, the kind of the in-platform KPI performance level, and also like on your back end, what's going on with margins, what's going on with stock levels. These products are not created equal, and they should not be promoted equally. They need different levels of advertising pressure. They might need different budget. They might need different efficiency targets. And that's the way that you support your business. So you don't want to tell Google, and back in the days, we would, you know, that's why we did these crazy granular builds. We would have like single product ad groups and stuff like that, so that we could handle things individually. Now we have to find a new way of moving forward with this campaign type that values consolidation, as we showed earlier. So we recommend segmenting products by their contribution to your business. So that means bringing in like first-party data, for example. And one thing that drives me crazy is people hear first-party data and they immediately think audiences, first-party audiences. That is one type of first-party data that you have in your business. And you have a lot more. You know, everything that you know about your inventory is first party. Your margins are first party. All this data that you and only you know, that's all first party. And typically it's off channel and it's not connected to the channel. And Google doesn't know about that. How are they supposed to optimize toward that if they don't know about it? So in a very simplified approach, I mean, what we do is we score these products and we make sure that they're always in the fitting campaign. So this is a simplified example where you've got like 3 campaigns, high, medium, and low. And what distinguishes them is the ROAS aggression, or the efficiency target, and also the budget. These 2 things will determine how aggressively or conservatively a product is marketed by Google's algorithm. And I think what's important, you know, I don't want to knock this approach because I think it's a start, but you'll see approaches out there like, for example, volume by efficiency. And this will give you buckets like you'll hear like heroes and zombies or leaders and bleeders. It's the BCG matrix, the Boston Consulting Group matrix. They had like, what was it, dogs and stars and stuff. It goes back decades, and people use this as well in their shopping and PMax segmentation. But the thing about that is that you're only looking at these two dimensions, and actually there are so many more dimensions to any given product. You're looking at the historical performance. Google already knows about the historical performance. That's actually one of the areas where they're stronger. So it's a start. You can nudge Google in the right direction with an approach like that. But what the beauty is, like with this approach that we use, we really view these campaigns just as vessels. It has that budget and the ROAS target attached to it. These are the two primary levers that you have. But products can end up in one of these vessels for entirely different reasons. One product might end up there because the in-platform performance is great, and any number of reasons, and that's valid. Another product might end up in there because it's high margin and it's behind sales plan, or any number of, it depends what data you feed in. The products can get scored differently for any number of reasons. And that allows, even with a simplified structure, like just 3 campaigns, you can express a lot of logics. You can have all kinds of rules in there with this multi-dimensional segmentation, so that, that complexity is concealed. It's reflected in a simple campaign structure, but ultimately you're optimizing toward a lot more than Google alone can do. So I want to show you how this plays out in real life. And I think I start with a case that I think is a good expression of what I've just told you. I'm going to look at inventory-aware sales. So like, you're going to see a lot of statements on here. Google doesn't know, or PMax doesn't know, PMax doesn't care. And that's not like a value-based statement. I mean it literally. PMax doesn't know about your stock level. So how is it supposed to do something about it? You have to tell it. That's the principle is as simple as that. So let's just look at inventory-aware sales. Google knows if your product is in or out of stock. But here, we've supplied a score or an index that shows how good the availability is on different sizes and product variants. And you'll see, like, it's pretty logical, but so 0 means that the product is out of stock, and 10 is it's available. It has a lot of stock in every size and so on. And you'll see that the conversion rate increases by and large, almost in a linear way as the stock depth improves. And it's pretty logical, because if a consumer lands on a product landing page and it's only available in like 2 sizes, and there are these strange sizes or like uncommon sizes like an XXXS or XXL or whatever, then of course the conversion rate is not going to be good. Now, this is something that's so simple and has such a clear correlation to performance, and Google doesn't know about it. That's the point here. But I also want to remind you about this multidimensional thing, because although this has a high correlation to conversion rate, it's not a perfect correlation. You'll see that the 5 bin kind of really overperforms. It performs a bit higher than you'd expect. And also very notably, that 10 bucket kind of sucks. So that's because there's, like, let's think about the 10 bucket. If you have that much stock of a given product, maybe it's overstock, maybe there's something wrong with that, maybe it's a very low demand product, something's going on there. And so it's actually kind of makes sense why something that scored 10 might have a lower conversion rate. And the 5 could just, happen to have a lot of high demand products in it. And that could vary anytime that you snapshot this data. One time the 7 might have a lot of high demand products in it, or the 3. It's hard to say. So that's why you want to take a balanced approach and look at as many different data points as you can. Logistics aware sales. I think this is kind of a natural extension of the inventory aware sales. the last one, sometimes I'm able to name who I'm talking about, sometimes I'm not. But PMax doesn't know about your stock levels. They don't know about your warehouses either. You do. You can act on that. So in this case, this is with Look Fantastic, which is part of the Hut Group, absolutely massive retailer here in the UK, if you're not familiar with them. And they have warehouses that are more or less profitable for them to ship out of. And this was important data for them to reflect. And yeah, it's as simple as them telling PMax about it. In this case, it was a signal that's important. It gets reflected in their inventory score. And this could stop them from driving products, because PMax sees that a product has high demand, that it's converting well, etc. PMax doesn't know that it's shipping all of those out of a warehouse that costs you a lot of money and it's bleeding you dry. So you can reflect that information and become more profitable. And they were also able to not only be more profitable in terms of their fulfillment, but they were able to increase their revenue in an expansion market like Germany. And it's as simple as telling them. Bestseller dependence. Yeah, let me back up for a second. A thing about PMax, I always feel like it's this old saying, to be careful what you wish for. Like, for years, everyone's telling Google, I want more volume and better efficiency. And these two things are actually kind of at odds with each other. But Google worked hard and they delivered something that performs really well in the platform. But the way that it does that, it's kind of like water following the path of least resistance. So this is because it's going to seek out the highest performing combinations of products and traffic to do that, which sounds good, but isn't necessarily. This is why people complain about brand traffic in Performance Max, because of course PMax seeks out the brand traffic. It performs well. Of course, PMax has a lot of remarketing in it. It performs well. Of course, PMax pushes bestsellers. There's high demand, they convert well, it performs well. But you might want to make sure that other products in your category, in your catalog, are getting attention too, because that's actually more incremental for your business. That's actually moving the needle for you. The bestsellers might be doing fine organically, but it might be more meaningful to push something that has a great margin, but it's getting a bit neglected. So we can tackle this in Performance Max. And here's the case with the Miami Heat. I really think it's an interesting case. You can see in the left-hand chart that a control versus treatment, where our approach is the treatment. You can see that our treatment campaign marginally increased the number of items that were in this, these low conversion buckets, like 1 to 2 monthly conversions. But if you look over at the next chart on the right-hand side, that's about the share of revenue. And you can see that a couple of interesting things happen here. We massively increased the number of revenue coming from products with like 2 monthly conversions, 3 monthly conversions as well. And bestsellers, by the way, didn't get neglected. They did good too. But also these kind of kissed by, this is a very interesting bucket here. The 0.011% of a conversion to a full conversion. This dropped a bit, and that's, I would argue, good, because as we've seen, a lot of that bin is actually the so-called kissed by attribution things. So to me, that's what moving the needle looks like, when you can start getting more revenue out of your low volume products that might be neglected. And also your bestsellers are doing fine too. And maybe some of that vanity stuff goes away. This is still the Miami Heat. We can also look at a higher kind of aggregation level, how this worked out. So for the Miami Heat, they're a really interesting business because most NBA teams are not direct to consumer. There might be like an LA Lakers web shop out there, but it's actually run by Fanatics, a retailer. on their behalf, and it just appears to be D2C. But the Miami Heat is actually genuinely a direct-to-consumer e-commerce operation, which is very unusual. Now for them, jerseys are of course their bread and butter. That's where a lot of their revenue comes from. But they also care a lot about these other categories, because with jerseys, they're competing against Nike. They're competing against Fanatics. They're competing against Dick's Sporting Goods in every sporting goods store. The jerseys are actually very commoditized. But what they wanted to do was to also make sure that they're selling some of these other things, that these other categories that are more unique to their offering, their D2C offering. So that's the cool thing, is that we could take the revenue share at the categorical level in jerseys from 49% down to 40%, which at their volume is significant. And we're actually able to grow their volume and improve the mix. So it's not necessarily an either or. They could improve the revenue volume and the revenue kind of composition. So that's the type of thing you can do when you help PMax do it. Let's talk about own brand sales for a minute. PMax doesn't care what brand it sells. It's going to sell, it's going to follow the path of least resistance. It's going to want to sell a brand like, let's look at this basketball here. It's probably going to want to sell a Wilson basketball or one of these top brands. But this is Decathlon. They're quite big here in Europe, and they have a lot of brands of their own. So they want to make sure those brands are, of course, vertically integrated and the margins are better. So yeah, they also sell Wilson basketballs, but what they actually want to promote are their own brands. So this is, again, something, by helping PMax understand what's important to your business, you can manage. And I love this case, because I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, we doubled their revenue, look how impressive we are. Yeah, they spent twice as much too. That's how they doubled their revenue. But what's super cool here, they scaled those PMax campaigns, but they scaled it into their own brands. They did that by using inventory scoring and scoring their brands higher, promoting their brands and demoting these vendor brands, these commodity brands. So they improved their revenue share on their own brands from 70% to 78% while doubling that revenue, which is quite an impressive story. So that worked out really well for them. And this was done through our inventory scoring approach. And I don't want to be gatekeepy here. It's possible to do this on your own. I actually want to inspire you. And if you need help doing this, we're pretty good at it. So we're happy to help you. Let's look at brand and non-brand sales. I said earlier, PMax loves to pursue branded traffic. Of course it does. Why wouldn't it? But you might not. You might feel differently about that. Brand traffic, people feel totally different ways about this. Some people think it's a Google tax and they resent it. Some people are very picky about the cost per click there and what's going on with the competition and stuff like that. Some people, it's totally fine, let it rip, but it needs to be budgeted and reported separately. All those things make sense. They're all possibilities. But PMax isn't going to do that necessarily by itself. So something that we built is a script. You can scan this QR code. I'm assuming you're watching from a laptop or desktop. Maybe you're watching from your phone. Sorry, you can't scan it. But anyway, this script is going to do three things, or one thing in a way. It's going to take all of that traffic and it's going to split out what percentage of it is branded, what percentage is non-brand, and what percentage is not categorized. So yeah, what we've built here, it will display this as a timeline, which is more or less impossible to do without a script. This is kind of the only way to do it. And it will show that to you in Google Sheets. And this can be handy because if you've never looked at this before, you'll want to know what the baseline is and how it might be changing over time. How does it change if I increase my budget? How does it change if I change my ROAS target? How does it respond to those things? You can learn that. It will also you know, if you are taking measures here, for example, using brand exclusions or whatever the case might be, you can see if those things are working and what the effect of those is. So in this case, just as an example, this is a German office supplier. You can see that they had 62%, almost 2/3 of their traffic was branded, of their revenue rather, from PMax, and they implemented a feed-only campaign, and that dropped down to effectively 0. And then the cool thing is, by having this, you know, they scheduled a script to run daily, but you can see suddenly brands started popping up again, and this allowed them to see, hey, we're starting to have a brand traffic problem again here in PMax. It turned out that Google started automatically creating assets. They stopped the auto-created assets, and the little problem for them, the problem went away again. And there's other charts in here besides conversion value. You can also see the conversion rate of brand versus non-brand, and you'll see, you know, your conversion rate is going to be totally different on these two traffic sources, and it totally makes sense why PMax wants to pursue it. Let's look at direct-to-consumer sales. I am going to come back around to Miami Heat. I told you, I love that client so much. There are so many cool things that they're doing, and I told you before that something special about them is that they're one of the only genuinely D2C sport franchises in the US. But here is something amazing that happened last year. They got to the NBA Finals, and it was totally cool. You can see, like, they were in the conference finals the year before, and you see a big spike there, but there's a big difference when the NBA finals are there. And something they had learned from the conference finals, or a concern that they had, like, okay, we know there's so much more awareness right now. There's a lot more traffic for us. Are we maximizing that? You know, are we really getting the most out of that? And they wanted to make sure that they did not miss that opportunity in 2023 when they hit the finals. Now, I said PMax doesn't know your moment, but you do. What do I mean by moment? Here's just an example. Like the Miami Heat, they just care more than anyone else. I told you they're competing against Nike, they're competing against Fanatics, whomever else, but no one's going to care more than the Miami Heat, right? So they've got the stats, the player stats, the scores, they know what's going on. And, you know, they can dynamically push player products based on what's happening live in a game. Like if you know, Tyler Harrell has a huge play or whatever the case might be, they can react to that. So that's the type of thing they do. And I also told you that, you know, some of these categories like shorts or jerseys are quite commoditized. There's also simple things they can do, like they have bundles that are in there, so they'll promote a special offer there in the PLA unit. And yeah, this resulted in a lot more conversions and revenue for them, and they made sure that they didn't miss their moment. Up and cross sells. We're actually, I think this is the final case, so I hope you're still with me and enjoying it. We'll get to Q&A soon, okay? Up and cross sells. Well, what do I mean here? This is changing slightly, and I have an add-on at the end, but PMax doesn't know what's going on in your carts and your baskets, what your order composition is, but you do, or you can. So just as a simplified framework here, you'll have some, like, there's this kind of chaos monkey inside of Google Shopping and inside of product-based advertising in general, which is that the product which is clicked is not necessarily the product that gets bought, right? So sometimes that's going to have positive effects. I just nickname that inflection products, although inflection mathematically can go down too, but and sometimes it's going to have totally negative effects. Like, so let's say someone clicks on a product and then they upsell into a higher margin category, or they, you know, they just buy add-on products, whatever the case might be. And, you know, then I've nicknamed it deflection when the opposite sort of happens, like they've kind of, yeah, downsold and ultimately had a less profitable transaction than the click would have suggested that Google is trying to bid appropriately for. So these charts might look a little complicated at first, but they're not. Basically, I've mapped here all these products for two different brands, all these products with conversions in a given month. And the bubble size there is the revenue for those products. And actually, excuse me, I think in this case, it's the profit. And you'll see that on the y-axis, on the x-axis, we've got the lead gross profit margin. So that is the margin of the product clicked. And then on the y-axis, we've got the cross-sell profit margin. So that's the profit margin of the actual order. And in a perfect world, these two things would move in a completely linear one-to-one relationship, where the margin of the transaction is equal to the margin of what was clicked. But that's not always the case. You could also look at absolute profit too, the actual euros or dollars or pounds of profit, and not the percentage margin. But what we can see is that some products upsell that are in green, where basically the bought margin over indexes the clicked margin, and other products under index. So you've lost money. And then some are neutral or too close to call. But in the end, it creates three buckets, good, neutral, and bad. And you can use that to categorize the effects that you see on products, and whether those clicked versus bought effects are good or bad, because we know the clicked versus bought effects are occurring, and there's nothing we can do about that. But if we know that they're good or bad, then we can, again, let Google know that these ones with positive profitability effects are more important to us, and these other ones we want to demote. Now, at Google Marketing Live last month, they announced profit optimization, which is really cool. And it works with these two data points: conversions with cart data, which is a special add-on to your conversion tracking that lets Google understand your order composition, and cost of goods sold. You need to submit that in your feed, and this lets Google know, yeah, your COGS. And when it does that, it can calculate ultimately the profitability of every order, and it can start bidding toward profit instead of toward revenue. Here I had a quick look to see, like, okay, that's very interesting. How many people are ready for this? How does this look? So I looked at several hundred advertisers and saw that 40% of them have that special tracking add-on implemented, which is, I think, a lot, but only 5% are using COGS. And that's not a lot. So you need both in order to make profit optimization work. And we'll see. I think Google has a lot of trust building to do if they want advertisers to start sharing their COGS with them. But meanwhile, as soon as you have conversions with cart data implemented, it's not hard to do. You can already start doing interesting things with your inventory scoring. So yeah, again, I mean, we've built software that helps you with this. We have machine learning that helps score your products, because it's very complicated to think about things in multi-dimensional terms. But mostly I want this to be a call to action to you, an inspiration that it is possible to connect PMax to your business goals, and it's also necessary. Before we get into the Q&A, I understand that we're 45 minutes in. I've got 15 minutes available for you for Q&A. Some of you might be at your time box and you've got to go. Don't worry, we'll share the recording by email, and you can also follow or connect on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. Just send me a connection request. And thank you. And for those of you who can stay and who might have questions and answers, let's get into the questions and answers. Hold on one sec. Just pulling that up. Okay. I'm not the first question. Sorry, the first question is from Harrison Phillips. He said, Mike, why are you so awesome? So thanks, Harrison. Good friend. Thank you, and for making me read that out loud. And I don't know, Harrison. It's just the way that I am. All right. What do you guys think of certain agencies or ad specialists that set up PMax campaigns and pretty much never touched again? When spending tens of thousands on PMax a month, there should be some monthly optimizations possible, right? I see this with our own account, but also hear this from others, that there's this sentiment of set up PMax and chill. Is that the new Netflix and chill? Set up PMax and chill when it's running okay, and they just leave it running okay. I don't think that that's okay. You know, when Google was first pitching this, or selling this, they would say things like you only need one campaign, and I think even they have moved beyond that a bit, which is good. And they'd also say things to us like you can turn on PMax and go on vacation and come back and enjoy what it did for you. And so yeah, it is very highly optimized, and there's less. Back in the days, you'd be very busy with negative keywording. You'd be very busy with bid optimization. There were many different promotional controls. And so some of those jobs to be done are no longer to be done. And some teams might not know what to do next. But that's why I'd love to call your attention to something like, making sure that your products are always in the campaign where they belong, and that campaign, that reasoning reflects things that are important to you. That's just one example. But no, I do not think that PMax is set it and forget it. In answer to the question, in a short answer. I've got a question to the quote, or PMax works best when there are more than 30 conversions. Is this only the sales conversion, or can it be a combination of leads, contact forms, product sales? So first off, I think actually greater than 60 is ideal. Definitely you want to be greater than 30, in my opinion. Something that I'm researching, in principle, PMax learns at the conversion action level, which means that it could learn across campaigns, but I just haven't really seen that effect, but I'm looking into that. I still think that individual campaigns need conversion volume. Then this thing like leads, contact forms, product sales, I mean, that definitely it depends what kind of a business you're in. If you're in like a B2B e-commerce business, a product-based B2B, like that could make sense. We're typically dealing with a lot of B2C brands and retailers, where it's ultimately we're talking about product sales. That's what my data is aiming to reflect, their product sales. But if you're in a lead gen account, I definitely think that having micro conversions that can help instruct PMax, and then also making sure like afterwards to modify your conversion value to teach it what were the quality of the leads. These things are certainly important and could help. But you want the volume to be there as much as you possibly can. I'm curious if you think PMax is better for all size companies, since from what I see, it doesn't meet large enterprises' needs. This is the catch-22 of PMax that I tried to express earlier. I think that the value proposition is clearest for small companies, but on the other hand, they often don't have the necessary budget or volume in place that will really let the algorithm thrive. But actually, I think that large enterprises are very well positioned to use PMax effectively. I think that A, they have the volume in place, as I mentioned, and B, they're more likely to have a large catalog and a lot of heterogeneity in their data, like a lot of difference in their data. They're more likely to have some resources available to make that data available to the platform. And so actually, I think that the problem is that enterprises might be, running too simple setups. I don't want to advocate complexity for the sake of complexity, but you want to reflect meaningful information. You want to reflect your strategy through your campaigns, and through your segmentation. But I think we mostly work with enterprises and it works well, or larger advertisers. Do these 30 conversions need to come from this campaign or all campaigns in the account together? That's what I was mentioning about learning at the conversion action level. To me, that is inconclusive, but it doesn't look positive. And one more question about that. For accounts with less than 30 conversions, it's better to use standard shopping campaigns. Well, this isn't actually necessarily a PMax thing. It's a smart bidding thing. And produced a nearly identical chart for smart bidding for standard shopping. So it's actually that smart bidding needs a certain volume. So in that case, you know, if you don't have that level of conversions, try it, see if it's going, but it's sort of the fear factor in terms of, is this going to perform or not perform? And I don't often advocate manual bidding anymore, but it could be a use case. So Harrison is back with a question instead of why I'm so awesome. Do you think PMax will ever incorporate bid caps into the technology? Why do you believe it does not currently have that option available? I think that based on recent experience, if enough advertisers want this and complain about it and persist at that, then it's possible that Google will do it. You know, Google they always add things on their own terms. That's the kind of the caveat there. They added something like search term reporting. They added people wanted brand negative keywords. They added brand exclusions, and now they have a new feature called brand restrictions. They're listening, and they're developing features, but on their own terms. And as to why Google doesn't do that, and it's something I kind of agree with Google on. I mean, big caps can make sense, but I think that the days of worrying about CPC obsessively are gone. I think it's more of an observation metric. You definitely want to watch it, and you might be concerned if you see that it's spiking about why that's the case. But now I think it makes more sense to be focused on the value per click, because it's much more interesting. You know, at this point, the bidding is commoditized and it's owned by Google. And even if you're one of the advertisers who hasn't used Google's bidding yet, the reality is that all of your competitors are using the bidding. And so still Google, like, you're living in Google's world there. But the value per click is very much on your terms. That's about the conversion rate. What are all the things I can do to improve the conversion rate? That's about the average order value or the value per conversion. What are all the things that I can do to increase the AOV? That's your wheelhouse. And when you start thinking about value per click instead of cost per click, you move this from a cost center to more of a value center. And sorry, one more thing before we move on, like in relation to bid caps, to Google's kind of line of thinking, as long as the CPC and the value per click are in relation to each other, it doesn't necessarily matter how high the CPC is, because those two things, the ratio of those two things together is the ROAS on a per click basis. And I've analyzed this before and found that it usually works out okay. Do you think that the Boston Matrix, Cash Cow Star, etc., works for companies with large data sets? Yeah, I mean, this is I think it's a starting point, and I don't want to say that it doesn't work at all. But you know, there's an extent to which it's double optimization. It's optimizing the optimizing, and I think that you can have some incremental success out of that. But you know, you can, for example, help reduce like this bestseller dependence that we talked about. You might move the needle a bit there, and you'll never eliminate this kind of head products versus long tail products. You'll never eliminate that. That's inherent to the channel, and you'll see that in your other channels too. But you can move the needle. So I think it's a starting point, but I wouldn't limit myself to that. And I think you have to be careful how you set it up, how you choose the parameters for something like that. Someone asked why conversion rate is lower at the 10 bucket and that size analysis earlier with stock levels. I think I explained that. I'd have to dig in, but my hypothesis is that there's a lot of low demand products in there and a lot of overstock that get caught in that bucket. You managed to increase the share of a specific product for Decathlon in the PMax campaign. I assume you did this through a filter on the product feed. Are we able to do something similar for a brand that is not an e-commerce business? For example, a company that creates websites and wants to strengthen its B2B audience segment at the expense of the B2C segment. I mean, one thing that you can do is feed audience signals to PMax, and feed it with your B2B audience signals. Bearing in mind that it's not audience targeting, it's a starting point. It's kind of like when you are playing a song on Spotify and you've clicked thumbs up on some songs, and then Spotify is choosing the next song for you. And sometimes it works really well. Sometimes after a while, you're like, this isn't what I want to listen to. But another thing that you can do, which I think we've only talked about this at conferences in Germany so far, but we do some interesting stuff too, not only with inventory scoring, but also with page feed scoring. So you can write me about that if you're interested. So it's always, it's tricky to segment B2B versus B2C. It can be tricky to get that implemented the way you want. Someone asking, people love the 30 conversion segmentation thing. Would I recommend, before you have over 30 conversions, would I recommend segmenting? No, I would not. I think that's segmenting too early, but it always, again, it's a risk benefit thing. If the segmentation is important to you enough and meaningful enough to you, because there are some campaigns with less than 30 monthly conversions that still perform at or above target. So it's a risk benefit thing. Do changes of TROAS and seasonal adjustments in Google Ads work together or against each other? Does it confuse the algorithm to use both at the same time? Good question that I'm not 100% sure about. Might be more one for Google's product team, but I'm not aware of a conflict there. I think it's, I don't know. I'd have to understand why you're changing both of these things at the same time. I actually generally like to be rather committed to the budget and the TROAS in a given campaign, because again, I think of these as kind of vessels or buckets that things should move in and out of, and that's what matters, rather than changing those all the time. It can make sense, but seasonality adjustments are awesome, and I think might be a better way to do it. Depends what your use case is. You can write me if you want to talk about that more. What do I think about the new betas for PMax? I want to tread lightly there, because maybe if you can ask me about a specific beta, because a lot of these are under NDA and I'm not allowed to talk about them. But if we talk about, for example, profit optimization, I think that's super cool. I'm excited about that one. I think, there are these third-party tools out there like Profit Metrics, for example, no affiliation. And I think they still have their place because they're server side, and you don't expose your data to Google, and so I think they'll remain popular. But I'm glad that Google has taken this step. Do I recommend a separate campaign? Oh boy, hold on, I'm looking at the clock. I do have to leave. I have a hard stop. There are a lot more questions here, so my goodness. It's always that way. Well, let me just answer this last question if I can. Do I recommend creating a separate campaign focused solely on new acquisition for new users, and another one without new acquisition to focus on remarketing? Yeah, I think that's a perfectly valid strategy. You have to be careful. There are two new customer modes in Google. There's like this new customer value where you change ultimately the reporting and the way that like you make it that new customers are worth more, which I don't think that's a very good approach, to be honest. And then there's also new customer only bidding mode. So you'll just bid for new customers, or Google's going to do its best to do that. You'll still see some returning customers in there for some reason, but the tricky thing about that is that it's hard to get volume on those campaigns often. But I think it's perfectly valid logic to have those two campaigns in parallel to each other. But with that, I'm very sorry I'm out of time, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the questions. Really appreciate it. Bye.